In the quiet outskirts of a small Japanese town, an old, decrepit hospital stood as a grim reminder of days long gone. The paint on the walls had long since peeled away, leaving bare, cracked surfaces exposed to the elements. Ivy crept up the sides of the building, reclaiming it inch by inch. The windows, now shattered or missing, allowed the wind to whistle mournfully through the empty halls. The once bustling hospital was now a silent, eerie shell, its former purpose lost to time. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mold and decay. Dust coated every surface, and cobwebs hung like delicate lace in the corners. The faint light that managed to penetrate the gloom cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to move on their own. It was in this forsaken place that our story begins. With two unsuspecting souls drawn into its haunted depths, Takumi and Ayako had heard the rumors. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the abandoned ward, warning of strange noises and ghostly apparitions. Despite the ominous tales, the couple was intrigued. They had a fascination with the supernatural, often seeking out haunted locations and urban legends. This hospital, with its dark history and eerie reputation, was too tempting to resist. As they approached the building, Takumi felt a chill run down his spine. The air grew colder, and an oppressive silence seemed to blanket the area. Ayako, ever the brave one, took the lead, pushing open the creaky front door. The sound echoed through the empty halls, startling a flock of birds from the nearby trees. Inside, the darkness seemed to close in around them. Takumi fumbled for his flashlight, the beam piercing the gloom and revealing the dilapidated interior. Ayako's voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you feel that?" Takumi nodded, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. They made their way deeper into the hospital, their footsteps echoing eerily off the walls. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling and the distant drip of water. Every shadow seemed to move, every corner hiding some unseen presence. They reached the entrance to the abandoned ward. The door was marked with a faded sign, "Isolation Ward," and it hung slightly ajar. Ayako pushed it open with a trembling hand. The air inside was colder still, and the darkness seemed even more impenetrable. Takumi's flashlight flickered, casting strange, dancing shadows on the walls. The ward was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and empty rooms. Beds, long since abandoned, were left in disarray. Medical equipment lay scattered, rusted and broken. They moved cautiously, the silence weighing heavily on them. It was then that they heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whispering. Takumi froze, straining to hear. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, an eerie susurration that set his nerves on edge. Ayako grabbed his arm, her grip tight with fear. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Takumi nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. They followed the sound, drawn deeper into the ward. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, yet still impossible to understand. It was as if the walls themselves were speaking, their voices, filled with sorrow and despair. They reached a room at the end of the corridor. The door was closed, but the whispering seemed to emanate from within. Takumi hesitated, but Ayako, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty, save for a single bed in the center. The sheets were rumpled, and a thin layer of dust covered everything. The whispering stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence. Takumi's flashlight flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, they both saw a figure, barely more than a shadow, standing at the foot of the bed. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving them in stunned silence. Ayako's voice trembled. "Did you see that?" Takumi nodded, his throat dry. They backed out of the room, the fear now palpable. As they retraced their steps, the whispering began again, louder this time, and more insistent. It followed them, growing louder with each step. Takumi and Ayako broke into a run, the oppressive darkness closing in around them. They burst through the front door, gasping for breath in the cold night air. The whispering stopped, leaving only the sound of their heavy breathing. They didn't speak as they hurried back to their car, the haunted hospital looming behind them. As they drove away, Takumi couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the whispering voices were still with them, hidden in the shadows. The abandoned ward had left its mark on them, its dark secrets and ghostly inhabitants forever etched into their memories. The rumors were true, and the old hospital was a place best left undisturbed, its haunted halls echoing with the whispers of the past. Takumi and Ayako sat in their car, the engine humming softly as they tried to steady their nerves. The drive back to town was silent, the weight of what they had experienced pressing heavily on them. The abandoned hospital loomed large in their minds, its dark corridors and ghostly whispers impossible to forget. Takumi's hands trembled on the steering wheel. "Did we really see that?" he asked, breaking the silence. Ayako nodded, her face pale. "We did. I don't think I can ever forget it." They reached their apartment, a modest space in the heart of town. The familiar surroundings brought a small measure of comfort, but the fear lingered. They locked the doors, double-checking every window, and finally settled on the couch. Ayako turned on the television, hoping the noise would drown out the memories of the hospital. It didn't work. Every shadow in the room seemed to hold a hidden menace, every creak of the building a whisper from the past. Unable to sit still, Takumi got up and paced the room. "We have to go back," he said suddenly. Ayako stared at him, her eyes wide. "Are you crazy? After what we saw?" Takumi shook his head. "That's exactly why we need to go back. We need to understand what happened, why we saw, whatever that was." Ayako hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I don't like it, but you're right. We need answers." The next day, they prepared for their return to the hospital. This time, they brought more equipment, stronger flashlights, a digital recorder, and a camera. They also decided to bring their friend Satoshi, a local historian with a deep interest in the paranormal. Satoshi was skeptical but curious. He had heard the rumors, but he had never experienced anything himself. When Takumi and Ayako described their encounter, he agreed to join them, eager to uncover the truth. As the three of them approached the hospital, the atmosphere seemed even heavier than before. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that stretched across the building's facade. They entered through the same creaky door, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. This time, they headed straight for the abandoned ward. The whispering started almost immediately, faint but persistent. Satoshi pulled out his recorder, capturing the eerie sounds. "There's definitely something here," he said, his voice hushed. They reached the room at the end of the corridor, the one where they had seen the figure. The door was still ajar, just as they had left it. Takumi pushed it open, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The room was empty, just as before, but the air was thick with a sense of presence. Ayako took out the camera, snapping photos of the room. As the flash illuminated the space, they saw it again, the shadowy figure, standing at the foot of the bed. This time, it didn't disappear immediately. It lingered, watching them with unseen eyes. Takumi felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice trembling. The figure remained silent, but the whispering grew louder, more insistent. Satoshi moved closer, his recorder still running. "Why are you here?" he asked. For a moment, there was silence. And then the whispering coalesced into a single, chilling word. "Help." The word sent a shiver through the room, the temperature dropping noticeably. Ayako took a step back, her fear palpable. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure seemed to flicker, and then it was gone, leaving them in stunned silence. Satoshi checked his recorder, replaying the captured audio. The whispering was clear, and the single word, "help," sent chills down their spines. "We need to find out more about this place," he said, his voice determined. Over the next few days, they delved into the hospital's history. Satoshi pored over old records and newspaper articles, uncovering a dark and tragic past. The hospital had once been a place of hope, but it had become a site of unspeakable horror during its final years. Patients were mistreated, and many had died under mysterious circumstances. The isolation ward, where they had seen the figure, had been used to house patients with contagious diseases. It was said that the staff had neglected these patients. The more they learned, the clearer it became that the spirits of the past still lingered, unable to find peace. One night, as they were going over their findings, Ayako suggested a seance. "We need to communicate with them, find out what they want," she said. Takumi was hesitant, but Satoshi agreed. "It might be the only way to help them move on," he said. They returned to the hospital, this time with candles and a Ouija board. The air was thick with tension as they set up in the abandoned ward.
The whispering started almost immediately more intense than before.
They lit the candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. Takumi placed his hands on the Ouija board, Ayako and Satoshi following suit. "Is there anyone here who wants to speak to us?" Takumi asked. For a moment, there was nothing, and then the planchette moved, spelling out a single word. "Yes." Ayako's voice trembled. "What do you want?" The planchette moved again, spelling out help. Satoshi leaned forward, his voice steady. "How can we help you?" The planchette moved slowly, spelling out free us. The room grew colder, the whispering louder. Takumi felt a chill run down his spine. "How do we free you?" The planchette moved faster now, spelling out find the truth. With those words, the candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The whispering stopped, leaving them in an oppressive silence. They sat in the dark, the weight of their task heavy on their shoulders. They needed to find the truth, uncover the secrets of the hospital, and free the spirits trapped within its walls. As they made their way back to their car, Takumi felt a sense of determination. They would return, and they would find the truth, no matter what it took. The shadows within the hospital walls held many secrets, and they were determined to uncover them all. The morning light struggled to pierce through the heavy fog that enveloped the town. Takumi, Ayako, and Satoshi gathered around the dining table. Their research materials spread out before them. The air was thick with anticipation and dread, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them. Takumi held a stack of old newspaper clippings and hospital records. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but his determination was unwavering. "We need to piece together what happened here," he said, his voice resolute. Ayako nodded, her face pale but resolute. "There's more to this story than we initially thought. We have to find out who or what is haunting that hospital." Satoshi, with his historical expertise, had dug deep into the archives, uncovering the hospital's troubled past. The hospital was shut down in the late 1960s, he explained. There were rumors of unethical experiments and severe mistreatment of patients, especially in the isolation ward. Many patients died under mysterious circumstances. Ayako shivered, the memory of the shadowy figure still fresh in her mind. "We need to find specific names and events. Maybe there's a way to connect with the spirits and help them find peace." They spent hours poring over the records, each piece of information revealing a new layer of the hospital's dark history. The isolation ward, it seemed, was the epicenter of the horror. Patients were often left alone for days, suffering from neglect and abuse. Some records hinted at unauthorized experiments conducted on the patients, further adding to their torment. As they delved deeper, a name began to surface repeatedly: Dr. Nishida. He had been the head physician during the hospital's final years. His methods were controversial, and there were whispers of his involvement in the unethical practices. Takumi frowned, a sense of unease settling over him. "Dr. Nishida seems to be a key figure in all of this. If we can find out more about him, we might be able to understand what happened here." Ayako found a photograph of Dr. Nishida, a stern-looking man with piercing eyes. "He doesn't look like someone who had much compassion," she said, studying the photo. Satoshi nodded. "From what I've read, he was known for his cold and clinical approach. Many of the staff and patients were terrified of him." They decided to visit the local library, hoping to find more detailed records about Jo, Nishida, and the hospital. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Tanaka, greeted them warmly. "How can I help you today?" she asked. Satoshi explained their quest, and Mrs. Tanaka's expression grew serious. "The old hospital, eh? It's been years since anyone asked about it. Many people prefer to forget it ever existed." She led them to the archive room, where dusty shelves held records dating back decades. They spent the next several hours combing through documents, their determination unwavering. Finally, Ayako found a journal belonging to one of the nurses, who had worked in the isolation ward. Her entries painted a grim picture of life in the hospital, detailing the horrors she witnessed daily. Dr. Nishida was particularly cruel to the patients in the isolation ward, the journal read. He would conduct experiments late into the night, and the screams of the patients would echo through the halls. "I fear for my own safety, but more so for the poor souls trapped in this place." Takumi clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. "We have to stop this. These spirits deserve peace." As they left the library, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the town. They knew their next step was to confront the past head-on. They needed to return to the hospital and try to communicate with the spirits directly. That night, armed with the new information and a renewed sense of purpose, they returned to the abandoned hospital. The building seemed to loom even larger in the darkness, its presence ominous and foreboding. They made their way to the isolation ward, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The air was thick with tension, and the whispering started almost immediately, louder and more insistent than before. They set up their equipment in the same room, where they had seen the shadowy figure. Takumi placed the Ouija board on the floor, while Ayako and Satoshi lit candles around the room. The flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the walls, adding to the sense of unease. Takumi took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he placed them on the Ouija board. "We're here to help you," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "Please, tell us what happened." The planchette began to move almost immediately, spelling out the words with a sense of urgency. "Trapped. Pain. Dr. Nishida." Ayako's eyes widened. "Are you one of the patients?" The planchette moved to yes. Satoshi leaned forward. "What do you need us to do?" The answer came swiftly. "Find the records. Expose the truth. Set us free." Takumi nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "We will. We promise." The planchette moved again, spelling out a final message. "Thank you." With that, the whispering ceased, and the room grew eerily silent. They packed up their equipment, a sense of purpose driving them forward. They needed to find the missing records and expose the truth about Dr. Nishida and the horrors that took place in the hospital. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly, following every lead and uncovering more pieces of the puzzle. They interviewed former staff members, many of whom were reluctant to speak but eventually shared their stories. The picture that emerged was one of unimaginable cruelty and suffering. Dr. Nishida had indeed conducted experiments on the patients, driven by a twisted desire for medical advancement. He had been aided by a few loyal staff members, but many had opposed his methods, fearing for their own safety. The hospital had been shut down after a particularly gruesome incident, but the details had been buried to protect those involved. With enough evidence gathered, they decided it was time to bring the truth to light. They contacted a local journalist, Mr. Yamada, who had a reputation for uncovering hidden scandals. Mr. Yamada listened to their story, his expression growing graver with each detail. "This is explosive," he said. "If what you're saying is true, it will shake this town to its core." Takumi handed over the documents and recordings they had gathered. "We need to make sure these spirits find peace. Exposing the truth is the only way." Mr. Yamada promised to investigate further and publish their findings. As they left his office, a sense of relief washed over them. They had done everything they could to help the spirits trapped in the hospital. That night, they returned to the hospital one final time. They walked through the dark halls, their footsteps echoing in the silence. As they reached the isolation ward, the whispering began again. But this time it was different. It was softer, almost grateful. They set up their Ouija board and placed their hands on it, ready to communicate one last time. "We did it," Takumi said. "We exposed the truth." The planchette moved slowly, spelling out, "Thank you." Ayako felt a tear slip down her cheek. "Rest in peace," she whispered. The candles flickered and then went out, leaving them in darkness. But this time, the darkness felt different. It was no longer oppressive but peaceful. They left the hospital, the weight of their mission lifted from their shoulders. The spirits had found their peace, and the truth had been exposed. As they drove away, the hospital loomed in the rearview mirror, a silent sentinel over the town. But now, it was a place of rest, no longer haunted by the whispers of the past. The early morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Takumi and Ayako's apartment, casting a soft, golden hue over the room. They had barely slept, the weight of their investigation and the emotions of the previous night still fresh in their minds. The phone rang, breaking the silence and startling them both. It was Mr. Yamada. "I've just published the article," he said. "The town is already buzzing with the news. The truth about Dr. Nishida and the hospital is out." Takumi felt a surge of relief. "Thank you, Mr. Yamada. We couldn't have done this without you." Ayako listened intently, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and apprehension. Mr. Yamada continued, "I received a lot of calls this morning. People are shocked, but many are relieved to finally know the truth. Some of the families of the patients have come forward with their own stories. It's bringing closure to a lot of people." After ending the call, Takumi and Ayako sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the impact of what they had accomplished. The truth was out, and the spirits they had encountered might finally find peace. But there was one more thing they needed to do. "We need to go back one last time," Takumi said, his voice steady. "We need to make sure the spirits are truly at rest." Ayako nodded in agreement. "I think we owe them that." They contacted Satoshi, who immediately agreed to join them for this final visit. The three of them met at the edge of the town, the now infamous hospital standing solemnly in the distance. The atmosphere was different this time. The oppressive heaviness that had marked their previous visits was gone, replaced by a calm, almost serene feeling. They entered the hospital, the familiar creaks and groans of the old building greeting them. The whispering was still there, but it was softer, less urgent. They made their way to the isolation ward, the place where it had all started. The room where they had first encountered. The shadowy figure seemed less menacing now, the air lighter. They set up their equipment, lighting candles and placing the Ouija board on the floor. Takumi placed his hands on the board, Ayako and Satoshi following suit. "We're back," Takumi said softly. "Is there anything you need from us?" The planchette moved slowly, spelling out a single word. "Peace." Ayako's eyes filled with tears. "You have it now. The truth is out, and people know what happened here. You can rest." The planchette moved again, spelling out, "Thank you." Takumi felt a sense of calm wash over him. "You're welcome. Rest in peace." The candles flickered, and the whispering stopped, leaving a profound silence. They sat in the quiet for a while, feeling the presence of the spirits fade away, finally at peace. As they left the hospital for the last time, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the building. The once haunted hospital now seemed like a place of rest, its dark history brought to light, and its tormented spirits finally free. The drive back to town was filled with a sense of closure. They had done what they set out to do, and the weight of their task was lifted. Satoshi turned to Takumi and Ayako, a small smile on his face. "We did it. We really did it." Takumi nodded, a sense of pride and relief flooding through him. "Yes, we did. Ayako leaned back in her seat, her heart lighter than it had been in days. We can finally move on. As they reached their apartment, the town seemed different. As if it too had been freed from the shadow of the hospital's dark past, the next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Mr. Yamada's article had sparked a wave of interest and investigation. Families of the victims came forward, sharing their stories and finding closure. The town began to heal, the truth bringing a sense of justice and peace. Takumi Ayako and Satoshi were hailed as heroes. Their efforts to uncover the truth and bring peace to the spirits deeply appreciated, but for them, the real reward was knowing that they had made a difference. One evening, as they sat together, reflecting on their journey, Takumi spoke. "We've done something important. We've given those spirits the peace they deserved." Ayako nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "And we've helped the town heal. It's more than I ever thought we could do." Satoshi smiled, raising his glass. To the truth, and to those who seek it, they clinked their glasses together, a sense of accomplishment and peace settling over them. As the days turned into weeks, the hospital became a place of curiosity and respect. The town decided to turn it into a memorial, a place where people could come to learn about its history and honor those who had suffered there. Takumi and Ayako visited the memorial often, each visit a reminder of the journey they had undertaken and the spirits they had helped. The whispering was gone, replaced by a peaceful silence. Their lives slowly returned to normal, but they were forever changed by their experience. The bond between them grew stronger, forged in the fires of their shared ordeal. And as they moved forward, they carried with them the memory of the haunted hospital and the spirits they had set free. The town, once shadowed by the dark past of the hospital, began to flourish. New businesses opened, families moved in, and the community grew closer. The memorial became a place of reflection and education, a reminder of the importance of truth and the power of compassion. Takumi Ayako and Satoshi continued their lives, but they never forgot the lessons they had learned. They knew that the past could never truly be forgotten, but it could be understood, and through understanding, peace could be found. Years later, as they stood together at the memorial, they felt a sense of contentment. The hospital, once a place of horror, was now a symbol of hope and healing. And the spirits, once trapped in torment, were now free, their voices finally at rest. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought them closer together and given them a deeper understanding of the world and themselves. As the sun set over the town, casting a warm glow over the memorial, they knew that they had made a difference, and in that knowledge they found peace.